The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet countryside, painting the fields in shades of gold and dust. In a small farming village that time seemed to have forgotten, life moved at the pace of rusting gates and tired engines. Most farmers here survived, but very few truly thrived. Machines broke faster than they could be repaired, and dreams often died quietly under the weight of debt. Among them was a young farmer named Armin. He wasn't the richest in the village. In fact, most people would have called him one of the poorest. But what made him different was not what he owned, it was what he believed. While others saw failure in broken tools and abandoned land, Armin saw opportunity, and sometimes that belief got him laughed at. That morning, a small local auction was being held near the old grain storage yard. Word had spread that a retired landowner's leftover equipment was being sold off, mostly junk, most people said. Old plows, broken carts, rusted engines that hadn't moved in years. But Armin still went. Not because he had money, he only had a few crumpled bills in his pocket, carefully saved from months of odd labor. He went because he believed that sometimes the things others discard still hold value if you are willing to see it. The auction area was crowded with skeptical villagers, arms crossed, laughing, gossiping. Some were there for entertainment, not purchase. Others were just curious. That's when they brought it out. A tractor. Or what used to be one. It was barely recognizable. The paint had long faded into a dull, lifeless gray. Rust crawled across its body like disease. One tire was flat, and the engine looked like it hadn't been started in years, maybe decades. It sat awkwardly on the platform like a forgotten relic that had no business being there. The auctioneer didn't even bother dressing it up. Old farming tractor, non-functional, sold as scrap, no guarantees. The crowd chuckled. Someone in the back shouted, "It'll cost more to bury it than to buy it." Laughter spread quickly. A few people even shook their heads in disbelief that it was being presented at all. It was the kind of thing people usually dragged straight to the junkyard. Armin, however, didn't laugh. He stepped forward slightly, his eyes locked onto the machine. Something about it felt different, not its condition that was clearly beyond repair, but the structure. The frame looked unusually reinforced. The metal joints weren't standard factory design. It had been modified at some point and not carelessly. The auctioneer raised a hand. "Do I hear anything starting at $50? The crowd erupted in more laughter. $50, you'd have to pay me to take it. Even scrap dealers won't touch that thing. Armin felt the weight of every eye in the crowd shift toward him as he took a step forward. Silence fell not because people respected him, but because they were waiting for the joke to land. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his last crumpled notes. A pause. Then he spoke calm and steady. "I'll take it." For a moment, no one reacted. It was as if the village itself didn't process what had just happened. Then the laughter exploded again, louder this time. Armin finally lost it. He just bought a dead machine. $50 wasted on rust. Even the auctioneer looked mildly surprised, but quickly recovered and slammed the hammer down. Sold. And just like that, the tractor was his. Later that afternoon, Armin stood beside the machine as it was loaded onto a borrowed flatbed cart. The other farmers passed by, shaking their heads or smirking as they went. Some tried to give him advice disguised as insults. "You should have burned your money instead, it would have been warmer." But Armin didn't respond. He was too focused. Because as the tractor tilted during loading, something caught his eye. A seam. Not a crack from damage, but a deliberate weld line hidden beneath layers of grime and rust. It didn't belong to the original structure. Someone had opened it before and sealed it again with care. Too much care. His eyes narrowed slightly. That wasn't normal for a broken farm machine. As the tractor finally settled onto the cart, Armin placed his hand on its metal frame. It was cold, heavy, but something about it felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. Almost like it was hiding something. Something important. Something someone never wanted found. And as the cart began rolling away toward his small farm, Armin couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a $50 mistake. It was the beginning of something far bigger than anyone in the village understood. Because buried beneath rust, silence, and abandonment, something inside that tractor had been waiting for someone to finally open it again. And Armin had just taken it home. The tractor reached Armin's farm just before dusk. The sky had shifted into a deep orange haze, and long shadows stretched across the fields like quiet warnings. The old cart creaked under the weight of the machine, every bump in the dirt path sending a dull metallic groan through its rusted frame. By the time Armin finally managed to unload it, sweat had already soaked through his shirt, but his attention never left the tractor. Most people would have pushed it into a corner and forgotten it, but Armin didn't. He stood there for a long moment, just staring at it. Up close, the machine looked even more broken than it had at the auction. The wheels were uneven, the paint was nearly gone, and parts of the engine were missing or replaced with mismatched pieces. It should have been worthless. And yet, something about it didn't feel right. Armin knelt beside the driver's side and ran his fingers along the metal body. The surface was rough, but not naturally so. It had layers, old rust over newer welds, and beneath that, sections that felt strangely reinforced, almost intentional. He frowned. Most farm tractors followed standard factory design. Even modified ones usually showed obvious wear or amateur repairs. But this was different. Whoever had worked on this machine knew exactly what they were doing. Carefully. Deliberately. That thought alone made Armin more alert. He grabbed a small flashlight and began inspecting the underside of the tractor. Dust fell in clumps as he worked, revealing bolts that didn't match, plates that had been added later, and seams that looked sealed shut with industrial precision. Then he found it. A hidden compartment beneath the driver's seat. It wasn't obvious at first. It blended perfectly into the frame, disguised beneath layers of grime and welded metal. But when Armin tapped it lightly with a wrench, the sound was different, hollow. Empty inside. His heartbeat slowed. Someone had built this compartment intentionally. But for what? Armin wiped his hands on his trousers and tried to pry it open. The metal resisted. It didn't even bend. Instead, it held firm like it had been designed to withstand force. Who builds something like this into a tractor? He muttered to himself. A voice suddenly came from behind him. You're wasting your time. Armin turned quickly. It was old Karim, a retired mechanic from the village. He leaned on a wooden cane, watching the tractor with narrowed eyes. His expression wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. You shouldn't have bought that thing, Karim said slowly. Armin stood up. Why, it's just an old machine. Karim shook his head. Nothing about that machine is just old. That got Armin's attention. The old man stepped closer but kept a cautious distance, as if even standing near the tractor made him uneasy. I've seen that model before, Karim said, not often and never in normal use. Armin crossed his arms. Then where did you see it? Karim hesitated. That tractor wasn't abandoned because it failed, he said quietly. It was abandoned because someone wanted it gone. The words hung in the air. A distant wind moved through the fields, rustling dry crops and carrying the smell of earth and iron. Armin frowned. That doesn't make sense, it's just farm equipment. Karim pointed at the sealed compartment, then explained that. Silence followed. Armin didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Instead, he looked back at the tractor. For the first time, it didn't feel like a broken machine anymore. It felt like something concealed. Something hidden on purpose. Karim lowered his voice. Years ago, there was a farmer in the northern fields. Smart man, too smart, some said. He modified his equipment, same style as that one. People thought he was improving efficiency. He paused. But then he disappeared. Armin's expression tightened. Disappeared. No body, no explanation, just gone, and his equipment was supposed to be destroyed. Armin looked back at the tractor slowly. The wind suddenly felt colder. Karam continued, but clearly someone didn't destroy it. They hid it instead. Armin stepped closer to the machine again, his mind racing. Why hide a broken tractor? Karam met his eyes. That's what you need to figure out. Then the old man turned and walked away without another word, leaving Armin standing alone beside the machine as night began to fall. Later that night, Armin couldn't sleep. The tractor sat outside under a weak lantern light, its silhouette stretching long and distorted across the dirt yard. Every few minutes, he would glance at it from inside his small house, unable to shake the feeling that it was watching him in its own silent way. Finally, he got up. He returned outside with a set of tools and a stronger lamp. If there's something hidden, he muttered, I'm going to find it. He knelt again beside the compartment and began working more carefully this time. He tested edges, pressed joints, and examined every seam with patience. Hours passed. Then finally he noticed something small. A faint indentation beside the locking plate. Not a damage mark. A trigger point. Armin hesitated. Then pressed it. A soft mechanical click echoed through the metal frame. For a second nothing happened. Then, a deeper sound came from inside the tractor. Not a crack or break, but a shifting mechanism, like something unlocking after years of silence. Armin froze. The lantern flickered. And somewhere inside the machine, something had just awakened. The click echoed longer than it should have. Armin stayed frozen beside the tractor, his hand still hovering over the small indentation he had just pressed. The night around him felt suddenly heavier, as if the air itself had tightened in response to the sound. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then it happened. A deep mechanical shift came from inside the tractor's frame, slow at first, then building into a series of controlled, deliberate movements. Metal parts adjusted behind sealed panels. Something inside was unlocking in sequence, like a system waking up after a long, forced sleep. Armin took a step back instinctively. The lantern beside him flickered again, casting unstable shadows across the machine. The tractor no longer looked like a lifeless wreck. It looked active. Alive in a way that made no sense. What did you build into this thing? Armin whispered to himself. Another sound followed, a soft hydraulic release from beneath the driver's seat. The hidden compartment he had been struggling with earlier shifted slightly, as if whatever lock held it in place had finally disengaged. Armin moved closer cautiously. He placed his fingers on the edge of the compartment and pulled. This time it opened. Not smoothly, but with resistance, like it had been sealed for years and didn't want to give up its secrets. Inside, there were no tools, no spare parts, no farming equipment. Instead, there were documents. Dozens of them. Old, yellowed papers sealed in protective plastic, stacked tightly in a hidden metal cavity. Some were folded maps. Others were printed records covered in codes, numbers, and land markings that didn't match any known registry Armin recognized. But that wasn't what made him freeze. It was the device attached to the back wall of the compartment. A compact mechanical unit embedded directly into the tractor's frame. It had wires, rotating components, and a faint blinking light that had just turned on. Armin stepped back again. That's impossible, he muttered. The device wasn't damaged, it wasn't old. It had been built with precision far beyond standard farming equipment, industrial-grade engineering, not something you'd find in a rural tractor. His mind raced. Why would anyone hide this inside a farm machine? And more importantly, why keep it powered? Almost as if responding to his thoughts, the device emitted a soft hum. Then, the tractor's engine clicked. Once, twice, and roared to life. Armin stumbled backward as the entire machine vibrated. The wheels didn't move, but the engine system itself activated fully, like a dormant core suddenly energized. Lights, small embedded indicators he hadn't noticed before, flickered on across the dashboard, not standard tractor lights. These were internal systems, monitoring systems. The tractor wasn't just running. It was responding. Armin rushed forward and slammed his hand against the ignition switch, trying to shut it down. But the machine didn't stop. Instead, the sound softened, stabilizing into a low, controlled idle, as if it had chosen to remain active. No, 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 Armin muttered, panic creeping into his voice. He pulled open one of the documents with shaking hands. It wasn't just farming data. It was land records. But not ordinary ones. These were modified, altered ownership entries, hidden transfer logs, and coded annotations marking entire sections of farmland that had been reassigned without official approval. And at the bottom of one page, a handwritten note appeared. If this system activates again, it means they found it. Armin's breath stopped. Found what? He whispered. A sudden voice interrupted the silence. You shouldn't be reading that. Armin spun around. No one was there. But the voice had been real. From somewhere in the dark beyond his farm, a faint movement stirred. Shadows between the fields shifted unnaturally, as if someone or something was watching. The tractor emitted another soft mechanical tone, almost like a warning. Armin quickly shut the compartment, but it was too late. Something had already been triggered. The system was no longer dormant. It was active, and worse, it had likely sent a signal. His instincts told him one thing clearly. He was not alone anymore. And whatever this tractor contained was now known to someone else. By midnight, Armin had dragged the tractor further inside his property, trying to hide it behind stacks of hay and old equipment. His hands were trembling, but his mind refused to slow down. Every sound outside felt sharper. Every movement in the wind felt intentional. He checked the documents again under dim light. The more he read, the clearer the picture became, not of farming but of control, land manipulation, hidden ownership changes, a system designed not to grow crops, but to control land itself. And the tractor, it wasn't just a machine. It was part of that system. Suddenly, a low vibration passed through the ground. Armin froze. The tractor responded instantly, its internal lights flashing once. Outside the barn, something metallic clicked. Then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. Armin extinguished the lantern immediately, heart pounding in the dark. The tractor sat behind him, silent again, but not inactive. Waiting. And so was whoever had just arrived. The darkness outside the barn felt heavier than usual that night. Armin stood perfectly still, his back pressed against the rough wooden wall, listening. Every sound mattered now. Every shift in the wind, every distant rustle in the fields, every faint creak of old metal from the tractor behind him. The footsteps had stopped. But that didn't mean the danger was gone. He held his breath, trying to make sense of what was happening. The tractor's internal lights were still faintly glowing through small cracks in its body, like a heartbeat that refused to die. Whatever system had been activated earlier, it wasn't fully asleep anymore. Then came the voice again. Not loud, not close, but clear enough to make his skin tighten. We know you have it. Armin's grip tightened on the wooden beam beside him. He didn't respond. Speaking now would only confirm his position. Outside, a shadow moved across the gap beneath the barn door, then another, at least two people, maybe more. They weren't villagers. Their movements were too controlled, too careful, like they had done this before. Armin's mind raced. Who are they? Police, thieves, or something worse? The tractor behind him gave a low mechanical pulse, almost like it was reacting to their presence. That detail made Armin's stomach turn. Because whatever this machine was, it wasn't just passive cargo anymore. It was connected to something outside his farm. Something that knew where it was and wanted it back. A sharp knock hit the barn door. Not aggressive. Controlled. Intentional. Open the door, a voice called, calm, professional, we don't want trouble. Armin didn't move. Another voice joined in, slightly deeper. We know you bought the tractor, just hand over what's inside and we leave peacefully. That sentence confirmed everything. It wasn't about theft. It was about retrieval. Armin slowly shifted his position, trying to see through a crack in the wall. Outside, he caught a glimpse of two men in dark clothing, not farmers, not locals. Their posture, their stance, it was trained. One of them held a small device in his hand. It emitted a faint blinking signal, pointed directly toward the barn. Tracking. They already knew. Armin turned back toward the tractor. It's not just a machine, he whispered under his breath. It's a beacon. As if responding to his realization, the tractor emitted another soft hum, this time slightly louder. The men outside paused instantly. He's inside, one of them said. The tone changed immediately. Less polite. More urgent. Last warning, open the door. Armin scanned the barn quickly. There was no way out except the main door or the small rear opening barely big enough for tools, but escaping alone wasn't enough. If they were tracking the tractor, taking it outside would only make things worse. His eyes fell on the hidden compartment again. The documents. The device. The truth. Then suddenly, a memory from earlier came back, Karam's words. That tractor wasn't abandoned because it failed, it was abandoned because someone wanted it gone. Armin finally understood. This wasn't junk. It was evidence. Outside, the handle of the barn door rattled slightly. They were about to force it. Armin made a decision. He rushed to the tractor and reopened the compartment. The device inside was still glowing faintly, humming like it was waiting for input. The documents trembled slightly as the machine's internal vibration increased. All right, Armin muttered. If you're calling them here, then you're going to answer me too. He pressed the same indentation again. Nothing happened at first. Then the tractor responded differently. Instead of mechanical movement, a low tone echoed through the system. A structured sequence of beeps and pulses. The documents inside shifted slightly, as if being indexed. And then, a projection flickered onto the inside wall of the compartment. A map. Not of his farm. Not of the village. But of multiple regions of farmland, some marked red, others green, others completely blacked out. Lines connected them like a network, a system map. Armin stared in disbelief. This isn't agriculture, he whispered. It's infrastructure control. Outside, the men began forcing the barn door open. Wood cracked. Metal groaned. Armin's heartbeat spiked. But before they could fully enter, the tractor emitted a sharp signal, this time strong enough to make the device in the intruder's hand flicker violently. One of the men shouted, "It's active." The tracker malfunctioned. Static filled the air. For the first time, confusion broke their control. Armin didn't hesitate. He grabbed the documents and shoved them into a waterproof sack. Then he climbed onto the tractor, not to drive it, but to understand it. Because now it was clear. This machine wasn't just hiding secrets. It was the key to them. The barn door finally burst open. Footsteps rushed inside. Flashlights cut through the darkness. "Stop him," someone shouted. But at that exact moment, the tractor system fully engaged for the first time. The engine roared not randomly, but with precision. The lights flared. And the machine responded as if it had been waiting for a command all along. Armin gripped the steering wheel tightly. And the tractor moved. Not forward. Not backward. But toward a direction he hadn't chosen. As if something inside it had just taken control. And wherever it was going, it was taking him with it. The tractor surged forward like it had been holding its breath for years. Armin barely had time to react before the machine jerked out of the barn, its heavy wheels crushing loose soil and scattered tools in its path. The roar of the engine was no longer mechanical noise. It felt intentional, controlled, like something precise had finally been awakened. Behind him, voices erupted in chaos. "Stop it. He's taking it. Shut down the tracker now. Flashlights cut through the night as the intruders rushed after him, but the tractor had already shifted into a strange mode. It wasn't driving like a normal machine. It was responding to something embedded deeper than Armin could see. The dashboard lights flickered in patterns, not randomly, but like coded signals. The steering wheel resisted his attempts to override it. Every movement felt partially shared, as if another system was subtly guiding the direction. "Where are you taking me?" Armin shouted over the engine, gripping tightly. The tractor didn't answer in words, but the hidden device in the compartment emitted a steady pulse. And the map projection he had seen earlier reappeared briefly on a small internal screen, highlighting a path. A route. Not away from danger, but towards something. The tractor wasn't escaping. It was returning. The fields blurred past as the machine moved at a speed no broken tractor should have been capable of. Within minutes, Armin had left his farm behind. The men chasing him quickly disappeared in the distance, unable to match the machine's sudden burst of power. Only silence remained, and the steady vibration of the tractor. Armin's mind was racing. Everything he had seen, the documents, the hidden system, the strange modifications, it all pointed to something far bigger than a single abandoned machine. This was not just about a missing farmer, it was about a network, a system designed to control land quietly, without attention, without resistance. And somehow this tractor was a part of it. Or worse, a key to exposing it. After nearly 20 minutes of relentless movement, the tractor slowed. Not because Armin commanded it, but because it had arrived. The machine came to a stop in the middle of an abandoned stretch of farmland Armin had never seen before. Unlike the surrounding fields, this one was untouched. No crops, no markings, just open soil stretching into darkness. In the center stood a collapsed structure, half storage shed, half hidden facility. The tractor's engine lowered into a quiet idle, then stopped completely. Silence returned. Armin slowly stepped down, his legs weak from tension and confusion. The moment his boots touched the ground, the hidden compartment on the tractor opened by itself. Not forced, not triggered, but unlocked. Inside, the documents shifted again, and beneath them, a final sealed folder slid forward, as if it had been waiting for this exact location. Armin hesitated, then opened it. Inside were detailed records, names, land transfers, signatures, and coded approvals stretching across years. Entire villages were included, entire regions quietly altered on paper, while farmers continued living unaware on land that no longer officially belonged to them. At the bottom of the folder was a photograph. A man standing beside this exact tractor. The missing farmer. Armin's breath stopped. The man in the photo wasn't random. He was confident, focused, someone who had clearly understood what he was dealing with, and written on the back of the photo was a message. "If you're seeing this, it means they found the system again. The tractor will guide you to the truth. Don't trust the registry, trust the machine." Armin lowered the photo slowly. "So this wasn't just abandoned," he whispered. "It was hidden." Suddenly, a low mechanical tone came from the tractor again. But this time, it wasn't activating. It was transmitting. A signal pulsed outward into the night, steady, deliberate, like a broadcast finally released after years of silence. Armin looked up sharply. "What are you doing?" he asked. For the first time, the tractor gave a response he could feel rather than hear. The dashboard lit up one final time, and a hidden speaker crackled to life. A voice emerged. Calm, recorded, human. "If you are hearing this, then the system has been reactivated. My name is not important anymore. What matters is what I discovered." Armin stood still, listening. The voice continued. "They didn't just take land, they rewrote ownership itself. The tractors were never machines, they were field units used to verify, adjust, and lock ownership data physically and digitally. Every modified tractor is tied to a hidden registry node." Armin's eyes widened. This wasn't farming technology. It was data enforcement disguised as agriculture. The voice ended with a final warning. If you found the tractor, then you are now part of the system. The recording cut off. Silence returned again. But this time it felt heavier. Because Armin finally understood. He wasn't just holding evidence. He was holding responsibility. A distant sound echoed behind him, far away but growing closer. More vehicles, more people. The system had reacted to the broadcast. And now they were coming. The tractor's engine started again, but gently this time, like a final offer. Not escape. Not control. Choice. Armin looked at the documents, then at the abandoned structure ahead, then back at the machine that had dragged him into this truth. Everything had changed in one purchase. A $50 gamble had turned into something irreversible. He took a slow breath and stepped forward. Not away from the tractor, but back toward it. Because now, the truth wasn't hidden inside the machine anymore. It was waiting to be delivered. And Armin was the only one left who could carry it.